The United States and China spent decades becoming more and more technologically interdependent as part of a deepening economic relationship. But now that these two countries view each other with increasing suspicion, the United States sees these technological ties as sources of vulnerability. American leaders worry that China exploits the tech relationship to steal secrets, modernize its military, inject disinformation, and more. In response, the US government has tried to stem the flow of technology products, services, and inputs to and from China. This is part of an overall trend known as technological decoupling. We've all heard in recent years of US moves to block Chinese companies like Huawei and TikTok from operating in the United States. That's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's not just the US government pushing for decoupling. Governments, companies, and other actors in China and around the world are all contributing to this trend. But no one knows how far it will go. So what does decoupling look like? The US government has two kinds of policies: defensive and offensive. Defensive policies aim to forcefully restrict the technology relationship to slow Chinese technological advances and influence. Key tools include export controls, visa restrictions, investment limits, and outright bans of Chinese technology. And while these tools are swift and powerful, they can have unintended consequences. The Entity List is an example of a defensive measure that prevents targeted foreign companies from importing materials from the United States. The number of Chinese companies on this list has quadrupled in the last 4 years. On the other hand, offensive actions focus on strengthening American technology at home to reduce dependency on China and to improve American competitiveness. This includes government support for research and development, education, and key tech industries like semiconductors. These are necessary investments, but they can take years to pay off. So where do we go from here? Well, there's a big debate in the United States about how far to take decoupling, and there are three main camps. Restrictionists believe that technological ties mostly help China and hurt the United States, so they favor severe restrictions. Cooperationists are at the other end of the spectrum. They view US-China technology engagement as largely beneficial, not something to significantly restrict. Centrists lie somewhere in the middle. They believe that any restrictive measures should be highly targeted, that they should be aligned with US allies, and combined with large offensive investments. This middle path makes the most sense, because there are risks and uncertainty on both sides. Too little decoupling could leave the United States vulnerable to Chinese espionage, sabotage, or influence, and it could make America complicit in China's digital authoritarianism. But too much decoupling could cut off key sources of skilled labor, supplies, and funds that US companies and universities rely on. Drastic restrictions could also cause irreparable damage to US relations with China and with many other countries involved in the global tech trade. The United States needs to thread a needle between excessive technological interdependence with China and a full-blown tech divorce. So far, Washington has imposed numerous restrictions without a clear strategy. The best approach is to place narrow, targeted restrictions on a small number of the most strategic tech sectors. This would buy time for US investments in its own technological strength to pay off, while reducing the risk of a runaway decoupling that spirals out of control.